A man stands on camera, brandishing an AK-47 rifle. He is not a soldier. He is not in uniform. He has not been charged. He has not been arrested. And the last time he sat down for a conversation, it was not in a courtroom. It was in Asari with the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. His name is Mujahid Asari Dokubo. And in a country where a man is currently facing a death sentence for words, for broadcasts, for what the prosecution calls incitement, Asari Dokubo has spent the better part of 2 years on video threatening to wipe out an entire ethnic group, boasting that his private army is deployed across at least 3 Nigerian states, and telling one of Nigeria's largest populations that, and I quote, he will still be selling Igbo like his forebears. Not a single arrest, not a single charge, not even a formal caution. So the question this video is really asking, the question nobody in power wants to answer, is not whether Asari Dokubo's words are dangerous. They clearly are. The question is, why does the Nigerian state respond to one man's speech with a death sentence and to another man's AK-47 with silence? Stay with me, because before this video is over, that question will answer itself. And the answer is going to reframe everything you thought you knew about how power operates in Nigeria. Before we go any further, if you are new to this channel, welcome. Niger Inside Desk exists for one reason, to give you the kind of analysis that goes beyond the headlines and the noise. Subscribe now, because this conversation is about to get deeper. Let us establish the facts clearly, because this story has layers that social media collapses into heat and noise. The most recent trigger point is February 14, 2026, Valentine's Day. A fruit market in Oil Mill, Rumugokworusi, in Obio Akpo local government area of Rivers State. Early morning, approximately 7 a.m., a dispute breaks out between a trader and a wheelbarrow pusher. The confrontation turns fatal. A man identified as Haigito Wenem, 30 years old, from Bageli village in Buruku local government area of Benue State, is killed by a man identified as Zakara Afaru, described as a Hausa wheelbarrow pusher. The Rivers State Police Command confirms the incident. Their statement is unambiguous. This was a clash between members of the Hausa and Benue communities. The police restored calm. There are no reports of mosque destruction. There are no reports of Igbo involvement. That is what the police said. That is what the evidence shows. But within hours, Asari Dokubo was on video, circulated widely across Nigerian social media, declaring that the incident was an Igbo invasion of Rivers State. He accused Igbo residents of attacking northern Muslims. He warned of a religious war. He threatened to show them what he was made of. Not one claim in that video matched the police report. Not one claim matched the independent accounts. Not one claim was grounded in evidence. The Rivers State chapter of Ohanaeze Ndigbo responded within 48 hours. Their president, Livingstone Wechi, issued a formal statement in Port Harcourt describing Dokubo's video as, and these are their words, venomous, inciting, and factually unfounded. Ohanaeze noted pointedly that both the victim and the alleged perpetrator in the oil mill incident were non-Igbo. The police had already said so, and yet the video had already done its work. But here's what you need to understand. February 2026 was not the beginning of this pattern. It was not even the middle of it. It was the latest chapter in a sustained, calculated campaign, and understanding that campaign requires going back to June 2023. We will return to that date, because what happened in June 2023 at Asari is the key that unlocks everything else in this story. But before we get there, we need to understand who Asari Dokubo actually is, and more importantly, what he has become. In June 2023, Asari Dokubo did 3 things in rapid succession that together form a political portrait. He visited President Bola Tinubu at Asari. He went on Channels Television and argued that Nnamdi Kanu, then in DSS detention awaiting trial, should not be released. And then he posted a viral video in which he appeared on camera with an AK-47, told the Igbo people they did not know their roots, and boasted that he would still be selling Igbo like his forebears if a certain condition was met. 3 acts: 1 visit to Asari, One statement against Kanu, one AK-47 on camera. The defense headquarters was asked about the AK-47 video. Their response was that going after Dokubo might appear undemocratic. Let that sit with you for a moment. We will return to it.
Now, let us be precise, because this is where the analysis must not flinch. Nigeria has laws on this, clear laws. The Cybercrimes Prohibition, Prevention, etc. Act of 2015, the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act of 2022, the Criminal Code Act, the Penal Code. Every single one of these instruments criminalizes the kind of content Asari Dokubo has repeatedly posted on video: threats to ethnic groups, incitement to violence, public brandishing of unlicensed military-grade weapons. In July 2023, the Igbo Lawyers Association, a formal body of lawyers of Igbo origin, wrote to the Acting Inspector General of Police, Kayode Egbetokun. The letter was titled Threats and Hate Speech Against Ndi Igbo by Asari Dokubo, a call for his arrest and possible prosecution. They cited the Cybercrimes Act, they cited the Anti-Terrorism Act. They waited. Nothing happened. In October 2024, the Human Rights Writers Association of Nigeria, Huriwa, issued a 72-hour ultimatum to the federal government: arrest Asari Dokubo or face a nationwide protest mobilization. Huriwa's statement was direct: a commander-in-chief yielding the sanctuary of the presidential lodge to a felon to disparage the military. Nothing happened. Also in October 2024, the defense headquarters responded to Huriwa's challenge. They said, and this is their official position, that arresting Dokubo might cause them to be accused of acting undemocratically. Huriwa called this what it was: offensive double standards that stink and diminish the status of the armed forces of Nigeria. Now, let us contrast that institutional response, inaction, deflection, rhetorical cover, with the institutional response to Nnamdi Kanu. Nnamdi Kanu was arrested in 2021 after being renditioned from Kenya, a process itself that raised serious questions under international law. He was held in DSS detention for years. He was tried on 7 counts of terrorism. In November 2025, he was convicted on all 7 counts. The federal government immediately applied for the death sentence. Their lead counsel, Adeboyiga Owomolo, SAN, told the court that imposing the maximum penalty was the only way to give justice to victims. 2 men, both recorded making incendiary statements, both accused of inciting violence. One was prosecuted, convicted, and now faces death. One walked freely into Asorok, walked freely out, posted AK-47 videos, made fresh ethnic threats in February 2026, and has never been invited for so much as a police interview. The Nigerian state does not have a problem with incitement. It has a problem with which community is being incited and against whom. Now, where does deliberate ambiguity enter this picture? Section 45 of the 1999 Constitution permits derogation from rights, including free expression in the interest of public order or national security. The Nigerian state has used this provision to justify its most aggressive actions against dissent. Yet the same state cites the risk of appearing undemocratic as its reason for inaction on a man brandishing military weapons on video. This is not constitutional interpretation. This is constitutional theater. The law is being deployed selectively, and the selection criterion is not legal, it is political. Asari Dokubo is also now a traditional ruler. He was installed as the traditional ruler of Torusa Samapiri in Degema local government area of Rivers State in early 2025. Traditional titles carry no legal immunity under Nigerian law, but they carry political insulation, especially when the holder has demonstrable access to the highest levels of federal power. This is where the analysis has to go somewhere uncomfortable, but the evidence demands it. Let us ask the question directly. What political function does Asari Dokubo serve? Begin with what is documented. In June 2023, Dokubo visited Asorok and publicly argued against the release of Nnamdi Kanu. IPOB's immediate response was blunt. Their spokesperson, Emma Powerful, said Dokubo was campaigning for Kanu's continued detention in DSS solitary confinement as a way of securing an oil pipeline security contract from the federal government. That is IPOB's allegation, and it should be assessed as such, but it is publicly stated, on record, and has never been denied with specificity. What is not in dispute is this: Asari Dokubo has, across multiple years and multiple incidents, functioned as an amplifier of anti-Igbo sentiment at precisely the moments when the Nigerian state needed a non-state voice to do what official policy could not. In June 2023, when pressure was building for Kanu's release following an appeal court's ruling in his favor, Dokubo appeared on national television to call for his continued detention. Ohaneze Ndigbo subsequently confirmed that there were ongoing efforts by Northerners and Asari Dokubo to pressure the federal government not to accept the request for Kanu's release. In February 2026, when the oil mill market incident offered a window for ethnic reframing, Dokubo stepped in front of that window within hours, before any investigation, before any official statement, to brand the event an Igbo attack on Muslims. There is a question about Asari Dokubo's own ancestral identity that he has answered in multiple contradictory ways, and when we get to the counter-argument section, that contradiction will matter more than you might expect right now. Now, let us move to the 2027 dimension. Nigeria is in a pre-election political climate. The Tinubu administration is managing multiple simultaneous pressures: the Southeast question, which has never been resolved since the Civil War and which the Kanu case has kept inflamed; the Niger Delta resource control question, which Dokubo embodies in his most confrontational register; and the northern political calculations, where any softening towards the Igbo, whether through Kanu's release or through Southeast infrastructure investment, risks being read as weakness by a coalition Tinubu still needs. Asari Dokubo occupies a specific function in this triangulation. He provides the federal establishment with a rhetorical resource. When the Nigerian state cannot officially say Igbo agitation is terrorism, Dokubo says it on camera. When the state cannot officially accuse Igbo communities in Rivers State of communal aggression without evidence, Dokubo releases a video. The state then has the luxury of neither endorsing nor retracting, simply allowing the narrative to circulate. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented political behavior with a clear pattern across at least 3 years. Who loses? The Igbo community in Rivers State, an indigenous majority population in many parts of the state who have lived alongside Ijawa, Kalabari, Hausa and other communities for generations. They lose security when a former armed commander with a private force, which he has publicly claimed extends into the southeast, is allowed to brand them as aggressors without consequence. They lose institutional trust when lawyers and rights groups file formal petitions and receive silence. Who else loses? The Niger Delta itself. Asari Dokubo's escalating rhetoric has strained relations not only with Igbo communities but with the Bile Kingdom, the Tombia ethnic nationality, and multiple communities within Rivers State who have publicly accused him of territorial aggression and planning armed attacks. In July 2025, the Bile Chiefs and Elders Council gave a detailed press conference alleging that Dokubo's Amama soldiers were conducting armed surveillance of their communities. In February 2025, the Tombia ethnic nationality called on Governor Fubara to recognize their distinct identity against what they described as Dokubo's attempts to subsume them into his Kalabari territory. Who is conspicuously silent? The Nigeria Police Force, the Department of State Services, the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation, and critically, the leadership of the National Assembly, where no member has tabled a motion on Dokubo's repeated incitement. That silence is a political act. In a functional democracy, the pattern of incitement we have documented would have triggered a committee hearing, a resolution, an inquiry. None has occurred. That silence is not passive. It is a form of institutional endorsement, and it has a price, which we are going to calculate in the next section. Now, if what you just heard challenges what you thought you knew, drop it in the comments. I want to hear your read on this before we get to the part that reframes everything. Let us be precise about what this situation costs Nigeria, not as abstraction, but in measurable terms.
First, the federal-state power balance. Rivers State is already in a state of political convulsion. The Fubara-Wike confrontation, which itself has been described by Dokubo in colorful terms, with Dokubo at various points supporting Fubara and issuing warnings against Wike, has destabilized state governance for over a year. Adding an ethnic incitement layer to an already fractured state political environment is not a background condition, it is a force multiplier for instability. Every viral anti-Igbo video from a figure with documented access to armed men is a risk calculation for every business owner, every property holder, every parent sending a child to school in Port Harcourt's mixed neighborhoods. Second, the economic dimension. Rivers State sits at the center of Nigeria's oil economy. Port Harcourt is not a provincial city, it is an energy capital. When ethnic tensions flare in Rivers State, the investment climate responds. International oil companies have sophisticated political risk departments. Every incident of communal tension is logged. Every pattern of unaddressed incitement raises the cost of doing business and narrows the appetite for expanded operations. Nigeria does not get to have ongoing ethnic incitement in its oil capital and simultaneously maintain investor confidence at the level its foreign exchange needs demand. Third, the security implication. Asari Dokubo has publicly stated that he runs a private army deployed across multiple Nigerian states, including the southeast. The family of Nnamdi Kanu raised a pointed question in July 2023 that has never been officially answered. Could the men Dokubo admitted to deploying in the southeast be connected to the unknown gunmen activity that the federal government attributed to IPBO and ESN and used as the evidentiary basis for Kanu's terrorism conviction? This question is not rhetorical, it is a due process question of profound importance. If the answer is yes, even partially, then a man is facing death for violence that another man armed. Fourth, the ordinary citizen dimension. The Igbo man or woman running a shop in Rumwokorosi does not live inside political analysis, they live inside the social temperature that viral videos create. They have heard "I will wipe you out," they have heard "I will sell you like my forebears sold your fathers," they have watched the government do nothing. That is not an abstract democratic deficit, that is fear. It is the lived texture of being an ethnic minority in a city where a man with guns and political access has targeted your community repeatedly and the institutions that are supposed to protect you have looked away. Nigeria cannot simultaneously present itself to the world as a democracy anchored in the rule of law and maintain a two-tier justice system where ethnic targeting goes unpunished if the target is Igbo. That contradiction has a cost, and Africa is watching. Nigeria's international standing on the question of democratic norms and ethnic rights is not a peripheral concern, it is a core diplomatic asset, one that the Tinubu administration has actively cultivated through its engagement with ECOWAS, the African Union, and bilateral partners in the United States and United Kingdom. The Nnamdi Kanu case has already attracted international attention. Amnesty International, various diaspora organizations in the UK and United States, and civil society groups across the continent have raised concerns about the fairness of his trial and the conditions of his detention. The federal government has consistently framed those concerns as interference in Nigerian sovereignty. That framing becomes harder to sustain when the same government that pursues a death sentence for a man whose primary tool was a radio microphone allows a man with an AK-47, a private army, and multiple documented incitement videos to operate without institutional consequence. For Nigerians in the diaspora, particularly in the UK, where a significant Igbo community resides, and in the United States, where Nigerian Americans are an influential bloc, this story is not abstract, it is personal. It is the story of whether the Nigerian state is capable of protecting its citizens from ethnic targeting based on something other than who the target is. And the diaspora has the amplification tools, social media reach, political advocacy networks, access to international media, to turn that question into a reputational challenge for Abuja. There is also a broader continental pattern at work. across West Africa, the question of how post-colonial states manage multi-ethnic governance under resource pressure is not a Nigerian peculiarity. The impunity with which non-state armed actors in Niger Delta politics have operated, shielded by political patronage, protected by ambiguous institutional responses, is a variant of a pattern seen from the Sahel to the Great Lakes. What makes Nigeria distinctive is the scale. A country of over 200 million people with the continent's largest economy cannot have this pattern normalized without consequences that extend well beyond its own borders.
Let me steelman the strongest argument on the other side of this analysis, because intellectual honesty demands it, and because dismissing it without engaging it is a disservice to this audience. The strongest counter-argument goes like this. Asari Dokubo is a political performer. His videos are hyperbole, not credible threats. The Nigerian public, including the Igbo public, has learned to discount his rhetoric as noise. Arresting him would elevate him, grant him the martyrdom status that amplifies marginal figures. The Nigerian state, in declining to act, is actually depriving him of oxygen. That argument has surface plausibility. Let me challenge it on 3 grounds. First, the hyperbole frame dissolves entirely when you cross-reference what Dokubo says with what he does. He has not merely spoken, he has admitted to deploying armed men across multiple states. The Bile Kingdom and Tumbia community are not responding to rhetoric. They are responding to gunboats conducting surveillance of their villages. The gap between political performer and operational actor has already been crossed. Second, the oxygen theory of deplatforming presupposes a level political playing field. Nnamdi Kanu was prosecuted on the theory that his words incited violence. If words can be prosecuted as terrorism when spoken by an Igbo man from Abia State, then he is just a performer justification for non-prosecution of an Ijo man from River State is not a principled legal position. It is a political preference dressed as jurisprudence. Third, and this is where Dokubo's own contradictions become analytically significant. Recall the question I flagged earlier about his identity. Asari Dokubo, in an interview on Arise TV, admitted that he has Igbo blood. He stated, "My great ancestor was originally an Igbo man from Abam in Abia State. His parents moved to Obosi in Anambra State. From there he came to Kalabari and he became a Kalabari man." The man who threatens to sell Igbo like his forebearers is, by his own admission, partly descended from those same forebearers. This does not make his statements less dangerous, but it does expose the propaganda function of his rhetoric. It is performative ethnic antagonism in service of political patronage, not a principled articulation of Ijo grievance. The most common social media misconception about this story is that it is fundamentally a Niger Delta versus Southeast conflict. It is not. The communities challenging Dokubo most directly, Bile, Tumbia, multiple Kalabari subgroups, are themselves Niger Delta communities. The fracture line is not primarily ethnic. It is the classic fracture line of Nigerian politics, between those with access to federal patronage and those without it. What this means for Nigeria's democratic trajectory is specific and serious. A democracy that selectively prosecutes speech based on the ethnicity of the speaker and the target is not a democracy in any meaningful constitutional sense. It is a patronage system wearing constitutional clothes. And the longer that system operates without being named clearly, the harder it becomes to reform. What happens next? Let me give you the 3 most likely trajectories and tell you what to watch for. The first trajectory is continued status quo. Dokubo makes further inflammatory statements, particularly as the 2027 election cycle heats up and the Southeast political question re-intensifies around the Kanu sentencing. The state continues to look away. The Igbo community in River State and beyond absorbs the psychological cost, while human rights groups continue to make formal demands that generate no institutional response. This is the most likely short-term trajectory, not because it is stable, but because the political incentives for the federal establishment currently run in its favor. The second trajectory involves an escalation incident, a physical confrontation in Rivers State, a market violence event, or an armed clash that can no longer be framed as performative politics. Rivers State is already under governance stress. The Fubara-Wike conflict has weakened institutional capacity for conflict management at the state level. If Dokubo's rhetoric lands in a context where it catalyzes actual violence, particularly in the run-up to 2027 elections, the federal government will face a crisis of credibility that cannot be managed with silence. The third, the one with the most long-term democratic significance, is legal and civil society escalation. The Igbo Lawyers Association has already gone to the IGP. Huriwa has issued ultimatums. These formal moves are the beginning of a documented legal record that could, in a future political environment, support prosecution or a constitutional challenge to selective enforcement. The diaspora amplification channel also matters. Sustained international pressure tied to the Kanu case could create reputational costs that change the calculus in Abuja. What signals should you watch for in the coming weeks and months? Watch whether the Kanu sentencing, the death penalty application, generates a formal civil society response that links his case explicitly to the Dokubo double standard. That linkage, if it gains traction, reframes Kanu's situation not as a Biafra separatism story, but as a selective justice story. And selective justice stories have much wider political resonance across ethnic lines. Watch Rivers State. Governor Fubara's relationship with the Igbo community in the state is a political variable. How he responds or does not respond to Dokubo's February 2026 statement will tell you something important about whether the state government has the political space to push back against a figure who has positioned himself as a federal loyalist. Watch the National Assembly. If a motion on selective prosecution of ethnic incitement is tabled by any member from any zone, it signals that the political cost of silence is beginning to rise. The 12-month impact of the current trajectory is deepening ethnic anxiety in Rivers State, continued impunity for armed non-state actors with political connections, and a further erosion of the institutional credibility of Nigeria's security and judicial apparatus, credibility that is already under severe strain from the Kanu proceedings. The 3-year impact, if nothing changes, is more serious. A documented, irrefutable record of differential justice that will function as both a political grievance and a recruitment narrative, not for IPOB specifically, but for the broader idea that the Nigerian state is structurally incapable of protecting some of its citizens. We began with a question: why does the Nigerian state respond to one man's speech with a death sentence and to another man's AK-47 with silence? The answer, as we have now traced in detail, is not a mystery of jurisprudence. It is a function of political utility. Nnamdi Kanu's prosecution serves a political purpose that is legible to every actor in the Nigerian power structure. Asari Dokubo's impunity also serves a political purpose, one that is equally legible to anyone willing to read the pattern without flinching. This is not, let me be absolutely clear, an argument for or against Biafra. It is not an argument for or against the Niger Delta resource control movement. It is an argument for equal application of law in a constitutional democracy. It is an argument that a state which criminalizes speech while arming rhetoric, figuratively or literally, cannot sustain the claim that it governs on the basis of law rather than power. The Igbo man who titled his response, "You will soon join your ancestors," was not threatening Asari Dokubo. He was issuing a historical verdict. Every political actor who deploys ethnic incitement as a tool of patronage eventually becomes himself a casualty of the instability he helped create. Nigeria has seen this before. The country cannot afford to keep learning that lesson in blood. The unresolved thread I want to leave you with is that the Kanu sentencing is not yet complete. A final sentence has not been handed down. Watch what the Tinubu administration does in the coming months, because how it handles that sentencing in the context of everything we have discussed today will be a definitive statement about whether this government intends to govern all of Nigeria's 250-plus ethnic groups under one law, or whether it intends to continue governing some of them with a constitution and others with a verdict. That is the question. I will be watching with you. If this analysis gave you clarity, not agreement, clarity, Share it with one person who needs to understand what is actually happening. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.